Members of the Budget Committee, can you please come to Committee Room 2 for quorum?
I don't know where it is. And Burnside's on its way. Mary? So, clerk said we need to follow through with clerks to make sure that it's a staffing issue on how they manage that.
Oh, okay.
And room budgeting.
What I'm thinking of doing is just sending this off. This goes to executive tomorrow. Or get either executive, not make a decision now. Because
okay.
And
they
just,
need to check with their people.
Well, they just have to, it's just the staffing component.
Oh, okay.
And whether or not, I don't think there's an issue.
What time is executive? Because I have TTC tomorrow morning.
Well, it's all day, so I don't know.
Oh, okay. Mine is
Or deal with it at council.
okay. Well,
I just.
so you're gonna if you're gonna just then send it without recommendation, and then we can chat.
Well, that's what I'm gonna see if we can.
Are you at executive tomorrow? Okay. That's fine. Hey, Joe.
I didn't know. So if this is coming to executive. Yes.
Including the dates.
Okay. Oh, I thought because if we pass this, then it wouldn't come to executive. Yeah, this one. I don't know if this is on the. I'll figure out a way.
So you think it's not, or you're sure it is?
I didn't see it on the agenda.
Excuse me.
Yeah, hi.
Is this going to executive tomorrow?
I'm just double checking on that.
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. I think it's a decision that we just make at budget.
But there's a. Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We now have quorum. I'd like to thank the mayor for coming in for quorum. We have an issue with a few councillors who will be here very shortly, but we had the 15-minute deadline. So what I'll do is we will begin the meeting and then we will recess until the other two members get here. So I'd like to call the 37th meeting of the Budget Committee to order. We acknowledge that we are meeting today on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and home to many diverse Indigenous peoples. We'd like to welcome all the members of the committee, and you can, of course, watch on YouTube at Toronto City Council Live or follow the meeting on your tablet or smartphone at toronto.ca/council. Are there any declarations of conflict under the Municipal Interest Act? Seeing none. Can I have a motion to confirm the minutes of the meeting of the Budget Committee meetings September 5th, November 3rd, and November 10th? Councillor Mihevrick will move that. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay. We will can I have a motion, Councillor Nunziata, to recess till 10 a.m.
To 10?
Yeah, we'll recess to 10.
Will they be here by 10?
They will. That's the assurance is yes.
Okay, so I'll move that we recess to 10 o'clock.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for giving us quorum.
Everyone can go get their coffee.
Yes. So we're now recessed till 10 a.m. Okay, it's 10 o'clock. Let's begin the meeting. Welcome the councillors who are here today. We have 12 items on the agenda. I would like to move a motion to add new business about the regular budget committee meetings for 2018. Councillor DiCiano will move that. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, let's do a rundown of the agenda. BU 37.1, the capital variance report for the 9-month period ending September 30th, 2017. Questions, Councillor Carroll? Okay. Councillor Carroll has moved item BU 37.1. All in favor? I don't think so. No. Okay. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. BU 37.2 operating variance report for the 9-month period ending September 30th, 2017.
That one I will hold. I've got a couple of questions.
We'll hold that. BU 37.3 reserves and reserve fund variance report September 30th, 2017. Councillor DiCiano, do you want to move that? Okay, Councillor DiCiano, move that. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. BU 37.4 budget impacts of new minimum wage policy and other proposed Bill 148 changes. Councillor Carroll will move receipt of the item. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. BU 37.5 transfer of funds from the construction hoarding sign fee reserve fund and allocation to the Toronto Arts Council for the 2017 Arts in the Parks.
I'd like to hold that. I have questions.
Okay, Councillor Nunziata will hold that. BU 37.6 facilities 2017 capital budget and 2018 to 26 capital plan adjustments and accelerations and deferrals. Councillor Carroll, move that. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. BU 37.7 Fleet Services Division 2017 capital budget 2018 to 26 capital plan adjustments and accelerations and deferrals. Councillor Mihevc, would you like to move that? Okay. Just BU 37.7. Okay, Councillor DiCiano will move that. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. BU 37.8 street event users fees for business improvement areas.
I'll hold on. Okay. Yeah, no, it's okay.
Let Francis.
Okay. That's being held. BU 37.9 transportation services 2017 capital budget adjustments. You're gonna hold that one. I had questions too, so okay. BU 37.10 Arena Boards of Management 2016 Operating Surpluses Deficit Settlement. I'm going to hold that for Councillor Burnside. I believe he has a motion. Hopefully he'll be here shortly and he can move it. BU 37.11 Sony Center for the Performing Arts reallocation of the 2017 State of Good Repair capital funds. Want to move that? Okay, Councillor Mihevc will move that. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. BU 37.12 Toronto Transit Commission 2017 operating budget adjustment. Councillor Carroll, do you want to move that? Sure. Okay. So moved. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. BU 37.13 budget subcommittees and public presentations on the 2018 budget. Did you want to hold that? Okay. I think we have a motion on that. Okay, and the new item that I forget what number it is. New item on the schedule of meetings for 2018 that I moved. That's in front of you. Just a letter from me. Oh, sorry, the last item, which was a new item that I had circulated, BU 37.14, I believe. Yeah. So it's just the meetings, the regular budget committee meetings for the rest of the year. It's up on the screen. Oh, wait, no, we're on 14. We've already held it. The new item, the new budget, the new item. It's just, we could just move this as a quick item now if you want. Yeah. Okay, Councilman Hever, go move that. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay. BU 37.2, the operating variance report for the 9-month period ending September 30th, 2017. Councilor Carroll, you held that? Question?
Yeah, a couple of questions. And the economic development one, we're changing the way we deal with the, it's on page 29. Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to understand if this was coming from non-program before, if this, in the 2018 budget, will we see a $4 million increase?
So through you, Mr. Chair, what this is trying to do is regularize the TPLC dividend as a funding source that is a non-program revenue, just like our Toronto Hydro dividend.
Right.
What happened in 17 is as Council was approving some additional investments in ECDEV for Toronto Global and the international marketing. It was directly being offset by the flow of funds that TPLC used to send to Invest Toronto. You disbanded that, right?
Oh, you used to go to invest.
It used to go to invest, and then with it. Okay, so what we're just trying to do is turn that into a regular budget that has a net amount and redirecting the revenue into non-program like our other dividends for corporations.
So the international trade program, it goes back to economic development, or it goes to the new Global Toronto? Does this become our contribution to Global Toronto? Because I understand that's where we're not going to do as much international trade travel and running around. Global Toronto will do it. So how do we fund that?
So both of those items were funded initially by virtue of redirecting funds that went to Invest Toronto that's now coming directly to the city.
Goes to the city, and then we send a contribution to Global.
That's correct, and that's how it was being funded.
Okay.
With those redirected funds.
Okay. And then my general question is really about, is right back in the beginning. I don't know the appendix, but it's in the opening report too. You know, the variances are good news, except that unless we use them entirely to balance the budget, because it's land transfer tax again. But I'm just looking at the report about vacancies, and there are huge vacancy rates in terms of capital vacancies. And I'm wondering, is that primarily a matter of not needing those positions there because the projects themselves can't go forward, or are projects not going forward because we can't staff up fast enough? Do you know what I mean?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I think generally it's the second, because we go through a process of ensuring that positions come off the list when the projects are completed. So everything that's been built into the budget is for projects that are ongoing. And so the issue becomes finding the right skill sets to actually do the work. And I know that there are a lot of folks who are struggling with that.
So is there a point at which, looking at this, we're looking at it on a financial page, but back in those divisions, is there a point at which we have to start looking at the process of always getting them in to manage a project on a contract and then letting them go as soon as the contract's done? We can't constantly generate the positions. Is there any kind of policy work going into maybe we should have a full-time position so that the capital work can get done and we're not constantly stuck by the HR process?
So through you, Mr. Chair, in fact, we did that a few years ago, and you'll see that when we deal with the budget, yes, where we added a pool of positions in yes, IT that we're still trying to bring funding to the base, because we've been bringing that from capital to operating so that we could do that. So in addition to that, you know, what we see is that divisions have to, when they're doing these projects, they need to bring their own people to the table and backfill so that they have expertise, subject matter expertise, and they have to go out and bring skill sets in, like data analyst, systems integrator, project manager positions. And that's where the difficulty is as we engage in projects that are really new technologies for the city.
Right.
The only other option there is to then go through agencies where you're contracting that through the agency, which is a much higher level of cost. So we're trying to, I mean, I don't think the CIO is here, but I think there's, a fair amount of work trying to figure out how to balance those things out.
But the work is ongoing.
It's ongoing.
Okay, okay. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thanks, Councillor. Any other questions on the variance report? Operating? Seeing none, are there speakers to the item? Councillor Carroll?
I asked my question about positions because I think that's important to look at. It's great when the budget looks good, but if in capital we're just continually not getting the work done because short-term 3-month contracts to get things done means that we're constantly churning through the hiring process, scouring colleges for people who are learning how to do enterprise system overhauls. That's a course name now. People go to college to learn how to be an enterprise system overhaul manager. That's how much the need is there, not just for us, but for everyone. But I just want to highlight for people, I'm not going to move a motion, but I highlight for people that I think we have to put some pressure on whether or not constantly doing this on a temporary basis is getting us where we need to go versus maybe looking at that stable again. And that's a need that's never going to go away. You're constantly renewing IT. So we may need to look at, to get our capital projects done, we need to have in-house. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Councilor Mahevik to speak.
I want to add to that. Like, I have some notes here that say that in our capital positions, in some areas we're 20% below complement for capital work. And I think at the end of the day, and the way it shows up in my word, like there are projects that should have been done like a year ago and they're not done, and then we end up bringing in staff. We end up having meetings with the staff to say, okay, what's going on, and then you feel like you're a bit of a nasty person trying to encourage them when you know that they're working time and overtime. So like I don't know. I know in the public health there was the whole issue of vacancy was we had to address it, and we found that the problem was at the human resource level. I'm not sure where the problem. Like if this is money already in the budget, it should be spent so that we can get these projects done, and especially as we go into next year. I'm hoping, without moving any motions, that we find a way to encourage staff to, if it's a human resource issue. I hope it's not a nudge, nudge, wink, wink issue to kind of control the budget. Staff is saying no. So if that's the case, then let's find out what the bottlenecks are. Is it at the human resource level? Is it at the? Is it in the market out there that we don't have qualified people applying, or what is it? But somehow we're not getting projects. We don't have enough staff to basically undertake the work that we've committed to doing and budgeted for doing. So we need to fix that.
Thank you, Councilor. Any other speakers? Great. Okay. Recommendations are in front of us. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, next is BU 37.5, the transfer of funds from construction hoarding sign fee reserve fund. Councilor Nunziata, you held that. Did you have some questions?
Yes. Just a question. So the transfer of funds from the construction hoarding sign reserve fund. So what my question is it indicates that it's allocation to the Toronto Arts Council for 2017 Arts in the Park. So we're in November, we're almost at the end of 2017. Why is this request coming forward at the end of 2017 and not in the beginning? I thought maybe at first it was an error, it should be 2018, but it is 2017, correct?
Through the chair, yes, it is a request to utilize the 2017 allocation. The details of which maybe Mr. Williams can respond to.
So I guess my question too is, so the money has been spent and we're to reimburse you, is that why it's here?
Basically, yes.
Oh, so why not get the request in before?
Do you want to handle that, Sally?
Yeah, it should have been done before. The issue is that the Toronto Arts Council gets its various tranches for its budgets annually over the year in monthly tranches. And then both when we realized and they realized that this payment hadn't gone through because it is a reserve budget, they put in the request late. Neither of us had realized that they had already overspent on this side. So it should have been before. But it's also partly because this is the pilot program was only in 2016. So part of it wasn't clear about what it would be for 2017.
So it's been paid out of the Toronto Arts Council budget, and so
it's
they had the money to pay it? Like, how did they pay for it?
The total program is a partnership between the Toronto Arts Foundation and the Toronto Arts Council. So it's not what we're paying for the $200,000 through this tranche is a portion of a $900,000 program. So, for example, the Mayor's Evening for the Arts also helps support the program. A lot of the volunteer and the cash flow had gone through both the Toronto Arts Foundation and the Toronto Arts Council.
So in the future, they would bring the request in sooner rather than at the end?
Yes, so we'll make sure that this gets organized better between the foundation, the corporation, and the City of Toronto.
Okay, those were my questions.
No, I apologize. I don't know if I was just speaking, so I don't know if you asked the same question, Councillor. Can you just, this hoarding sign fee reserve, how much is in it? What is it used for? I know what I mean, other than construction, the hoarding sign.
It was, Sally can talk about it. There was a specific report helping set that up.
Yes, it was established in 2015, so it's funding. It's not a billboard sign tax. It's hoarding a sign. So every time developments use the linear feet of hoarding a sign on construction tax, there is a charge. Municipal licensing and standards then collects those fees, but because it's not a regular portion of funds, it goes into reserve fund that's then controlled by Economic Development Culture. So that was established in 2015. It was only drawn upon for the first time in 2016 for the first edition of the program, and the pilot program was first established in 2016 as Council approved it through a partnership between the Toronto Arts Council and Economic Development and Culture.
And what would this reserve amount be? How much does it generate a year?
There's about 350,000 right now, pending, or sorry, 316 right now, with an expectation for 17 it'll get to 350, and this takes 200 of it.
Okay, and I guess the request to allocate it to the Toronto Arts Council would be deemed an appropriate use of these funds?
Yes.
It is actually, yeah.
Okay. Yes, it is an appropriate use.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, move the item. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, BU 37.8. The street event user fees for business improvement areas. Councilor Mahavik, you held that down?
Well, my
Okay, so our practice is we do questions in-house, and then, yeah, the guests will ask questions. Okay, Councilor Mahavik, you had questions?
Well, I think just to say orally, what were the fees and and I see what the fees are, but what were the fees before? And I guess the intent here is just to facilitate, and if you could just confirm, the intent here is to facilitate these signature events. Is that who am I speaking with? Yeah, okay.
That is correct. We were looking at a reduction for BIA events only.
For BIA events only. And what kind of reduction, say percentage-wise, does this facilitate?
So this represents in 2018 would be a 75% reduction, and then in 2019 would be a 50% reduction.
So it'll go deeper this year and less deep than next year?
That's correct.
Right. Okay, so, and it goes from basically something like a few thousand to half of that, or a quarter of that this coming year?
That's correct.
Okay. And what would prevent us from saying no to the second? Well, I guess we can. If we want to keep it at a quarter of what they are paying now, that would be up to. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, just a
Or Nunziata?
So, with the recommendations, your report is that there would be a 35,000 reduction in 2018 in revenue, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So and that's at 50,000, correct?
50,000 in 2018, 35,000 in 2019.
Yeah, so if we were to increase that to 100,000, that would be $70,000?
Sorry, I'm not following. Your question is?
Rather than 50,000 attendance, we increase it to 100,000.
Well, the 50,000 is the revenue loss. You're talking about the number of people that are attending the event? Yeah.
Yes.
It's a difficult number to assess. We have a table that shows that, how many people attend different events. So sort of understanding what the revenue difference would be, I'd have to go back and do a calculation on that. But it's not a huge number. It's probably closer to $10,000 in difference, something like that.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Outside councilors, Councilor Fletcher?
Can you just go over now the signature event and the difference in BIAs? We've been working on this for a while. And a signature event would be how many people? And maybe BIA office, whoever wants to answer that, yeah.
All right, so our signature event was anything over 50,000 in our table?
Over 50,000.
Correct.
So if the signature event would be over 100,000, what would the impact be?
Well, I mean, we're really, we're trying to lessen the gap between the staff resources that are put towards these events and the fees that we're collecting. So there really is no major difference in the staffing that we provide for a lot of those events. It's basically the same kind of staffing levels.
But it would be, the charge would be different. Sorry, the charge would be different.
The charge we...
If we set the bar at below 100,000, your people, not dollars.
Right.
You're a mini event, you're not a signature event, or over 100,000 people would be a signature event, like the Taste of the Danforth is a signature event. And I'm wondering if I can just ask Economic Development about the nature of signature events, of the big type of events that exist, compared to a BIA starting off with 50,000 really would be a very small, wouldn't be considered signature in any way. So I guess, yes, if I can just talk about a signature event. A signature event is one that's expected to draw people from much wider radius, like the Taste of the Danforth, where people come from all over Ontario, or Kingsway, they're probably coming from all over Etobicoke and from Mississauga, whereas the Cabbagetown is just really technically that neighborhood. There's not a lot of people coming outside, or Riverside from that neighborhood, Danforth Mosaic from that neighborhood. So if that was the threshold of 100,000 people, that would meet that criteria a bit better of drawing people externally to the neighborhood than simply being something that would be technically a neighborhood event for those businesses, for the surrounding residents. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there speakers to the item? Any other questions? Councilor Fletcher, to speak.
I think Councilor Nunziata has a motion.
Okay, Councilor Nunziata, do you want to speak? Yeah, we're doing speaking, so do you want to speak?
Okay, I just want to move a motion. I gave it to staff. I just want to increase the attendance from 50,000 to 100,000. because it really won't have any impact.
The clerks are just, they're in the process of doing it, so I'm just wondering, can we just maybe hold this item down?
Yeah, okay.
We'll come back to, they're just working out
Yeah,
the
okay.
motion, so why don't we just hold this item down, and then we'll come back to it.
All right.
Okay, let's go to BU 37.9, Transportation Services, 2017 Capital Budget Adjustments. Councilor Havoc, question?
Yes, so I understand what you're trying to do. You need to find $7.3 million to help with the bridge rehabilitation. My issue is really the sidewalk rehabilitation piece, and it might be addressed in the 2018 capital budget, but I'll tell you what the problem is. What the problem as I see it is that in the push and pull of the budget, we're not doing, well, every area needs more money. But around sidewalk, and given our renewed goals around pedestrianization, I'm afraid of losing that $3 million. And I'm wondering whether that's recouped in or accounted for in the 2018 budget, so that the projects, and just anecdotally, when I have road issues, they take 2-3 years. You can kind of get it on a list, and within 2-3 years. Getting a sidewalk, holy smokes, you need 2 terms of council to get a sidewalk fixed. So I'm wondering if to take $3 million from that budget and put it towards a bridge, I want that money back so that we can do the sidewalk and pedestrianization projects. So I'm just wondering how that's going to work.
Through you, Chair, this is addressing a proactive adjustment to our ability to spend. So in terms of our projections for the sidewalk program, we're right now only anticipating to be able to spend 80% of it. And the impact is really just to sidewalk rehabilitation. So it's not to defer any new sidewalks. The 2018 program right now is projecting a $17 million program for sidewalks. That's what we're proposing in the 2018 capital budget, and we're looking at a way to address sidewalk backlog for the sidewalk rehabilitation.
So when you put this money towards a bridge, next year, do you take it from the bridge to put it back into sidewalk?
Through you, Chair, I wouldn't say it's sort of moving from one place to another. It's more about being able to project what our program can spend. The reason why we can't spend 100% of the sidewalk program in this year is because in some locations, the delivery of the sidewalk rehabilitation program is coordinated with utility cut repair. And just in terms of addressing work zone coordination, some locations need to be put off to a future year when work zones can be addressed.
So bottom line concern, just I don't want to prolong this too long. Can you assure us that it will not negatively impact sidewalk rehabilitation years in years to come?
Through your Chair, yes, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Question.
Councilor Nunziata.
So just on that point about the utility cuts. So when there are utility cuts and the sidewalks are damaged and they're unsafe, we have to tell our constituents, you have to wait a year or 2 years for the sidewalk to be repaired. Why is that? Like, why do they have to wait so long when they've damaged the sidewalk and it's unsafe and people are going crazy? Like, why do we have to wait that long? Well, what's the reason for that? Do we not? We get a deposit, don't we, from the utility for the utility cuts and.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So historically, the city has a protocol where they would undertake the permanent restoration themselves versus the utilities. The utilities were only responsible for a temporary repair. And we would allow it to go through a freeze-thaw cycle. However, based on the sheer volumes of utilities, we have a report that's coming back before council at the next meeting, which is titled Holding Utilities Accountable. And what that does is speaks to the new process that the city is looking to implement in January of 2018, where there will no longer be temporary repairs as a result of a utility cut. The utility companies will be undertaking permanent restoration immediately.
And the utility company will do the restoration?
That is
themselves?
correct.
But at city standards?
It'll be at city specifications, inspected by city staff, along with a 2-year warranty.
So would they do that immediately following their project?
That is correct. So when their work has been completed,
Yeah.
it'll be an immediate permanent restoration. There will no longer be temporary repairs unless it is through the winter months, which they cannot do the permanent repair.
Yeah.
And then come spring, the permanent repair will be the requirement.
Yeah, well, that's fine, because now residents are waiting a year, even longer than that, to get the sidewalk restored.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have identified it and provided background
But it's a real
information in the
problem.
upcoming report.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Questions myself. So on the supplementary report, the Morningside Avenue Highland Creek project, it was $2.8 million cost increase. Can you explain that in a little more detail, please? Why the cost overrun?
Through you, Chair, part of the reason was because this was tendered on a cost plus time basis as a pilot project in order to achieve efficiencies where the work would be done sooner. In this case, that hasn't quite worked out, and so the schedule is as per the original schedule. We're not getting the schedule savings, and so there will be a process to undertake to get returned monies from the contractor in that case.
Okay. Councilor Jean.
Yeah, thank you. Questions don't necessarily have anything to do with the amendments that are being proposed here, but just a question on the King Street pilot. The traffic lights that currently exist in that dedicated transit corridor, are they automated or are they regular traffic lights? And if they are regular, is there anything in the capital budget that would make them smart traffic lights in the future?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we certainly have two corridors, neither of which are King Street, that we just launched some smart signal programs, adaptive controls, just on Friday, actually. The purpose of that pilot is to test two different types of smart signal control, one that uses video and the other that uses infrared, correct? Right, so that we can find the best, one or both being the best to implement more broadly in the future, because we believe that that gives us a fair amount more ability to regulate flows. King Street does not have that capacity now. Based on the results of that particular pilot and the results of the pilot that we're currently undergoing, we might choose to upgrade those signals to be more sensitive with adaptive control. Those signals do have transit signal priority. We continue to work with TTC on the best way to most efficiently implement transit signal priority on that corridor, given the pilot.
Okay, and if those pilots with your adaptive control signals, if it looks like they're going to be working, or they could have a benefit, what would be the approximate cost to implement that on King Street? And is that in the budget? How do we make room for that in the capital budget?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the current pilot is about $100,000 to $150,000 per intersection for installation of the smart signals, and we believe that that would come down to about $75,000 per intersection if we did a broader procurement in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Trying to figure out how those questions pertain to the item, but you did a skillful job. You did a skillful job at getting them through there. So. I was just sort of watching that flow there. Anyway, okay. Are there any other questions? Any other questions on this item? Speakers to the item? Councillor Carroll.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to the questions regarding sidewalk repair. I look forward to that report and regularizing the new way of making the utilities do them. Toronto Hydro was part of a pilot in our area, in my ward, a whole subdivision where it was all undergrounded hydro, and they did an excellent job of the sidewalks, of keeping city standard. Now that it's done, you can't tell the difference between the ones that were done by Toronto Hydro and the ones that were done by our own contractors. But I will say this. Once we get this going, where we have the odd project and the city is doing it, we're really going to have to look at our deadlines, because once you have, as we did in the pilot area, once you have the utility doing immediate permanent permanent repairs and our own timelines are much longer, the community loses their minds, literally loses their minds over it. It makes no sense that my neighbor is back to normal. That's why some of you may remember I moved a motion called Getting Back to Normal, which failed. People want, when things are ripped up, to get back to normal. And if they're not back to normal in a timely fashion, they want to know when. They want a hard date, and they want to know when they can look out their living room window and see that their neighborhood is back to normal, especially with respect to utility patches and where you have to trench an entire sidewalk for however many kilometers. And we're still not there. That motion failed. But I think people may want to look it up and go back to it and set a standard for it, because when we get to budget time, these are the questions we're asking. Why aren't things done on time, and when will they be done on time? And we keep asking it, asking it, and asking it. In fact, if we have a standard, we rarely keep to it, rarely keep to it. I hope the utility report that's coming to Works, or actually it's on its way to council now. I believe it's on its way to council. Yeah, Works is done with it. I hope that actually does result in that ability for us to say to residents, yes, they're ripping up every sidewalk in your neighborhood. Here's when you will be back to normal. But if it doesn't, whether it's next year or 2 years from now or 3 years from now, eventually I think it's going to come to council to have to say, this is our guideline. I don't care what the price tag is. This is when, if you rip up an entire neighborhood, I want to see the neighborhood back to normal, and my residents are prepared to pay for it, because they are. They all say, what would it cost to see my neighborhood back to normal? That's all they want. Thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers to the item? You want to move the item?
I'll move the item, and yeah.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So we're going to go back now to BU 37.8, the street event user fees. I think the motion is ready. Councillor Nunziata, did you just want to speak to it?
I don't know if it's ready, is it?
It is ready, yes.
Okay. So I'm just moving it. So I'm changing it from 50 to 100. Attendance. That's it, I don't know.
Okay. All in favor? Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Councillor Fletcher would like to speak to the item.
Uh-oh. I will be very, very quick. I just want to thank transportation staff and Ms. Gray and her staff and the ECDEV staff for working on the street user fees after last year, when everybody got a bit of a shock as to being a small BIA and what the fees would be. And we've worked very successfully in the whole year to come up with some other fees that will not affect the budget too much, but will not break the bank at our small BIAs, which of course are our lifeblood along our commercial spines. So I just wanted to thank everyone for their hard work in getting us to this place.
Thank you, Councillor. So, item's been moved. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item is amended. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Item is BU 37.10, the Arena Boards of Management 2016 Operating Surpluses and Deficits. Councillor Burnside, I held that in your behalf. Did you have questions?
You might later on.
The BU 37.10, Arena Boards of Management Operating Surplus Deficits. Okay, Councillor Burnside, it's all yours.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, through you to staff. I'm looking at these operating deficits for the various arenas. Notice that this year, George Bell was almost $91,000. What was it last year?
You were there anyway, so you got to go back to your hood.
I gotta go
And while,
the nose will bleed.
yeah, and while you're at it,
trees, that air is the cleanest.
Moss Park last year.
Through the chair, we don't currently have that information before us, but we'd be happy to provide it to you.
Three major reverses.
Okay. Is there anything unusual, like were there any unusual circumstances that would have led to any of these deficits? Or just normal operation?
My understanding is that there was nothing extraordinary. It was normal operations, and they just did not meet budget.
Okay, so let's say their ice pad cracked and failed halfway through the season. And they, they have expenses of the facility and staff and whatnot. What would happen if they incurred a deficit as a result of that?
In the normal course, in accordance with existing council policy, the city would fund, ultimately at the end of the day, would fund these deficits.
Doesn't matter how high.
I don't believe that there is a limit associated with the council policy.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilor Nunziata.
Yeah, but on the other hand, if the arenas have a surplus, they give it back to the city.
Yes, the existing policy would suggest that any surpluses flow to the city to fund other arenas' deficits.
Yeah, so I know that George Bell Arena has had a surplus, and they've given the money back.
Historically, that has been the case, yes.
Yeah, okay. Just wanted to make that point. Yeah.
Good point. Speakers to the item. Councilor Burnside. And put the motion up.
We can put it up on the screen, please. You can read it, right? I don't need to read it.
Just a report back to the Budget Committee on alternative ways to address potential. Okay.
Okay, so just by way of history, the Leaside Arena, I believe they added a second pad and entered into an agreement that any deficits that they incur, irrespective of the reasons, would be added to their long-term debt. Currently, Leaside charges an extra $20 per hour to reduce that debt. I get that part of it. Unfortunately, the last few years, or since I've been elected, the manager at the facility has raised the issue that the pad, the original ice pad in the original arena, nothing to do with the new one, has been failing. In the last couple of years, they've spent over $50,000 repairing it. Speaking to staff, it's my impression that given the budgets and the available money as they are, that they'll just wait till the pad fails before they spend the $500,000 to $1 million to fix it. The problem with that is that would be a devastating situation for the facility in terms of meeting their targets. My concern is that this is out of their control, and I'm concerned with the way the city might deal with it, namely that they add that any deficit incurred as a result of a situation out of their control that has to do with the original ice pad would get added to their debt, which would be catastrophic, and which is quite unfair given the fact that all the other arenas, as we heard from the answers to my questions, would have that covered by the city. So I just want to see how staff would handle that situation, please.
Okay.
Sure.
Motion will arrive at that.
You can ask me.
Okay. On favor, any other speakers? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment? Opposed? That's carried. Item is amended. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, BU 37.13, the budget subcommittees and public presentations. Okay, BU 37.13, budget subcommittees and public presentations. I believe Councillor Mihevc or DiCiano has a quick amendment to this.
Well, I noticed
just
that
to switch the composition of the subcommittees.
Yes, there's 4 in one and 3 in the other. York, I want to be with Francis because I know York and I want to understand what's happening in Etobicoke. So with your indulgence, I'm very happy to move from Budget Committee, Subcommittee A to B. 3 and 4.
Okay.
Happy to do that.
Everybody good with?
I want to see where Etobicoke is.
We're going to North York. I want to go to North York.
Sleepy Hollow. I want to go to Sleepy Hollow.
So I think clerks have
What
that.
Councillor Fragedakis want?
She wanted this.
You wanted that?
Okay, so we actually have two motions. I'm going to be moving, I believe I'm moving this on behalf of Councillor Fragedakis, who has a community meeting. She's just trying to sort out, we talked to clerks, they're fine with switching this. It actually works out a little bit better for staff. So I'm going to move that motion.
She wants to attend.
Yeah. All in favor? Opposed? Carried?
She's switching with yours.
And then, did you have that other quick motion to change the makeup of the? Okay.
I'm sure they'll write it well.
Yeah, okay, we don't need to display it. So all in favor? Opposed? That carried. I think that works. So. I think we're done. Meeting adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Oh, we already passed that. So that's just the meetings for the remainder of 2018. Yeah, so that's all done. Thank you.
Enjoy that very much. But when you go to East Church, Councilor Davis is allowed to ask more questions. You signed on. You signed on for it. I just let you do it. I'm in favor of that. Can we come back?